The Canadian men's national team are heading to the CONCACAF Nations League semifinals, and they are also heading to the 2025 Gold Cup, which means that we will not see them back in competitive action until March. So, Alex, we have some time to fill. So we are going to take a look at some transfers and play a little game today called Stay or Go. So let's begin right off the bat with probably one of the most informed strikers in world football, Jonathan David. It's not a surprise to anyone who's watched us talk transfers over the last little bit. Alex, we've talked about Jonathan David a lot, but I do truly believe this will be the time we get to see him actually go this summer for two main reasons. Number one, he is a free agent, and that is the biggest one. In the past, when there's a contract, it makes it a little bit more difficult. If there's the striker domino effect that impacts Jonathan David's ability to move somewhere, on top of it, that a fee is expensive for Jonathan David. Lille were asking a lot. So being a free agent makes him a lot more attractive to certain clubs. And he's scoring big goals in big games. And it just looks like he's really just becoming this complete striker. I'm very excited about the idea of seeing where he's going to go. I have no idea where. I'm going to quickly just put it out there that he is going to leave. But Alex, I'm going to ask you what he should do. So I'm going to spin it a little bit. Do you think he should, A, stay, as in, I guess, France? If there's not an offer out there, could we see him stay at Lille or maybe PSG? They're struggling with the striker right now. They like to buy within Liga. He could maybe be a fit there. They're kind of going away from that big, like, global superstar. Maybe a player like Jonathan David could come in on a free and just be a really strategic signing. Or do you see him going literally anywhere else? Spain, Italy, the Prem. Take it away, Alex. What do you think?
It has to be go. I think, look, I don't mind the idea of stay in principle because I will continue to throw out there that Liga is a good league. Yes, it's had its issues, especially financially, but it's still a good circuit. You see it when you watch the league. You even see it in Europe. Like, the teams in France are competitive, even if they've had their historic struggles over the last few years. I think ultimately David's conquered all he needs to do other than winning a golden boot, which, hey, maybe he does this year and ticks that off, right? He's already won a title. He's already scored 20 goals multiple times in the league. If he goes to a PSG, what's going to be the goal for him there, right? Like, win some more titles. Of course, there's the question of Europe, but that's more of a PSG thing than it is a David thing. I think David has proven with his performances in Europe this year that, maybe he can find a way to conquer some of those European dreams in other countries. So I think for him, I'd like to see him try something new. What's great with him is he's such a positionally versatile player. As we now know, he's not just the number 9 for Lille. He's a number 10 for Canada. I'd love to see what he could do in Spain, for example, right? Such a tactical league. Maybe a coach there will really help him hit the next level. Italy, as such a strikers league. I feel like he could develop his game even further. And of course, if he goes to England, the Premier League, I'd love to see him handle that pressure. I mean, he's the Iceman for a reason. I feel like, it might take some adjustment at first, but I really think he'll adjust nicely. So no, I'm definitely team go for all of those reasons. And he's done his time at Lille. He's become a club legend now. Time for that new chapter.
All right, Alex, I want to push you a little bit more on it because I have 3 teams actually in mind, and I'm going to put a scenario out there because when I talk about Jonathan David, I usually get a lot of Canadian fans saying, well, if he leaves, I want him to start. I want him to not compete. And you and I had a bit of a debate off camera about the potential of him going to like a Barcelona or even a Bayern with Lewandowski and Kane there, because more than likely next season, if he signed on a free, they would indeed be there. He'll maybe have to play second fiddle for a season. Then he gets the opportunity to lead. So, it can be good. It can be bad. It would be different, though, to admit. For the last 4 years, we've saw so much of Jonathan David each and every season, scoring a ton of goals, getting all these starts. It would be weird to almost see him go to second fiddle. So the 3 teams I have in mind is, because I do want to push the stay a little bit. So let's just say he does go to PSG. They send Kolomuani somewhere. They say, David, this is your opportunity. You're going to be our leading guy. You're going to dominate Liga. We're going to be playing in the Champions League. You're going to have Speedy Barcola and Dembele beside you. You have the opportunity to score a ton of goals, have a bit of a Champions League push, but he's the guy. He's going to be starting pretty much every game all season long in a very good club and playing in the Champions League. So that's one option, just to play with it a little bit. The second one, I'll say Barcelona, because Jonathan David has come out I think this report came back in like 2019. I don't know if they're resurfacing it a little bit, Alex, but he said he's a big Barcelona fan. He grew up loving Barcelona. So let's throw Barcelona out there as an option. He comes in and he plays second fiddle to Robert Lewandowski because Lewandowski is having a great season. It's a bit of a transition. So next season, let's say he has like 10 to 12 starts, let's just say. And then the season after that, with Lewandowski leaving, it's open for David to take. And the third option, I'm going to say Arsenal. Arsenal in the past have been linked to Jonathan David. He's got some competition there. I mean, maybe Gabby Jesus leaves. You have Kai Havertz who is there, but then David has competition, but you maybe like his odds of potentially starting. So out of those three options, which one do you like the most?
That's a good question. I'd probably lean between Arsenal and Barcelona in these scenarios, because I think what you get at Arsenal is you get, like you mentioned, more of a clear path to start. It's Premier League. I think he'd fit well into that system. He can help, Mikel Arteta, a lot of the stuff they do defensively, but he can also help in possession, fluid. It would link up nicely with Saka, Odegaard, etc. I like Arsenal. I will throw Barcelona, though. I think there's a fit there in terms of the tactical fit with Hansi Flick. Look, Jonathan David is world class. I think it's fair to say, especially after how this season has started. I think he's finally made that jump. Like, he's got 3 seasons of work now to suggest that if he's not world class, he's so close that it's a matter of definition. I fancy his chances going to a Barcelona and going and staking out a spot, especially when, how old will Lewandowski be at the time? 37, 38 next year. I think that's something where, okay, maybe the first few months of arriving at Barcelona, there'll be, a battle to get minutes. But, what's beautiful with David is if you're Hansi Flick, you can play him on the right wing. You can play him on the left wing. You can play him at the 10. David hardly misses games too. He's always available. So when you got Champions League, Copa del Rey, La Liga, and guys are getting tired because, Lamine Yamal played a lot of minutes this year. Some of these other guys playing a lot of minutes this year. David's always ready to step up. There is something that just intrigues me about the Barcelona challenge. So I would lean Barcelona, funnily enough, although I do like the Arsenal shout.
That's fair, and I'll wrap it up very quickly. I would probably lean Arsenal for a couple of reasons. Number one, Jonathan David has come out and said, I can't see myself playing anywhere but the Prem. That quote has been twisted over the years, but I do think he could find success in the Premier League. And it almost reminds me a little bit of when Holland joined City, because they played without a traditional number 9. Arsenal kind of plays without one. So I'm curious to see what it would be like to put in a player like Jonathan David who can play different roles. He can drop, he can combine, he can do a little bit maybe what Havertz did, but he's a much more clinical striker. So I'd maybe like to see what he could do in that setup, because that Arsenal team is very, very talented, and I'm a big fan of the coach as well. But we need to move on. Next player is Alphonso Davies. Similar, stay or go. Stay would be signing a new contract at Bayern. He's found so much success there. He's had a couple of really good seasons at the beginning. You'd argue maybe his last couple of years not so great, but this year he's hit the ground running. He's, I wasn't sure if he was going to really jive with company. I was wrong. He's having a great season, and I think that he puts himself in a good position to maybe earn that contract that he wants. On the flip side, it's go to Spain, more than likely just to Real Madrid, maybe Barca. There's been those links, but I don't think that makes a ton of sense. So, Alex, out of those two options, would you like to see Davies re-sign with Bayern, or maybe head to Spain with Madrid?
I've always leaned side go, but I think this season I've shifted back over to stay. I think Bayern this year have offered me enough reason to suggest there's a lot for Davies still to do and learn and grow and do become a legend there. What I really like this year is companies push Davies to do new things, to play more inverted, to play more in the middle, to just, change the way he plays the game. And I think that sort of stuff will help him for his club career and also for country. With Real Madrid, you have seen it this year with, signing Mbappe. It's kind of reminiscent of their Galacticos of 2011, 2010, when it was a bit chaotic and it was just a lot of stars and not a lot of cohesion. Yes, you can see Davies fitting right in as a left back, but it feels like Bayern. I like the growth that he'd get there, and it's not like you're still an elite top 5, top 10 club in Europe, one that's expected to compete for Champions League. Yes, this Bayern group is flawed, and I think some of those flaws will make it very hard for them to win a Champions League this year. I think they really need to improve their midfield. And their back line just seems to, for whatever reason, in big games not be up to snuff. And I think they have some big questions to ask in goal. But I think, knowing Bayern, you have confidence they can fix some of those things over the next couple of years, and having Davies become maybe more of a pillar. Maybe he becomes more of a midfielder winger as time goes on under Company. Maybe that'll help. So I'm leaning stay, although, you can't help but be excited by Real Madrid. And I always say he fits very well at Barcelona under Hansi Flick. I know you said it's not realistic, but if it were to be, because he's on a free, it helps financially, give me Barcelona over Real Madrid right now.
I think you made some good points, and I agree with you that I used to think going into this season that he needs to leave in a team like Real Madrid. It's just a dream to see a Canadian playing at a club like that. But the big reason I thought he should leave is because when you play for a team like Bayern and you've dominated the league the way that he has, and that he's won everything in club football, you get complacent. It kind of seemed like Davies plateaued a little bit, and it looked like after a couple not so great seasons, it would be good to give him a new opportunity. And I don't know. I guess you could look at it both sides. Maybe he's, loving his football again right now under Company, and he's happy in Bayern. He's playing for that new contract. Or maybe he's like, well, I didn't have the greatest season last year. I kind of maybe lost that move to Real Madrid. Maybe I'm picking it back up because he wants the move as a free agent this summer. So I don't really know. I'll pick opposite to you just because I am intrigued of what that Real Madrid team could look like with Alphonso Davies going at left back. Mbappe doesn't look like it's totally worked quite yet, but with players that good, you have to imagine it's a matter of time. There's also a chance that Carlo won't be there next year, so there's a lot of factors into it. But it wouldn't bother me near as much. If you asked me this going into this season, I would have said leave for the reasons I just said, but I don't mind it. I think Company's doing some good stuff there. This Bayern team's flying. They're fun to watch, and Davies is playing great football. So as long as he can keep this type of level up and keep improving year after year, if he stays at Bayern, then I don't mind it whatsoever. The third big player we're going to highlight today is Alistair Johnston. There aren't a ton of rumors linking him anywhere, Alex, but it does seem logical that if he were to leave Celtic, he could maybe go to the Premier League, probably a mid-table team, maybe like a Crystal Palace, a Brentford, a Fulham, Wolves, maybe if they don't get relegated. Or should he stay at Celtic? Because there are rumors that, he may get a new contract. He could maybe be a captain one day. So what do you think? Do you think he should stay and try to become a Celtic legend, dominate the league, play in the Champions League? Or should he maybe be that next Van Dijk, Wanyama to leave Celtic and find success elsewhere?
Yeah, look, I think there's a lot of appeal of staying and becoming a Celtic legend. Like, look, let's, be very clear. Celtic's a very historic club, massive club. Like, you see it just with their atmosphere, the crowd. Even this year in the Champions League, they've been putting in some big performances. Like, I think there's a lot that if Johnston stays, you're not mad at it. I think, in fact, you're quite happy or quite pleased, especially if he becomes a legend. He's already a fan favorite. He gets becomes a captain. Magnificent. For me, though, I do feel like Johnston is one of those players that always seems to find a way to step up to the level that's asked of him. And I can't help but wonder what he could do in the Premier League. Like, you hear every story you hear about Alistair Johnston. I've been hearing a lot over the last week. There's some great, stories out there. And, one that's very evident is that Johnston is just like, he's a nut in the sense that he's a football nut. Like, he's the first guy to Celtic training apparently every day. He's always, doing an hour of film each day with the assistant coach there to go over the film. Same thing for Canada, first guy on the training pitch. Then they have to drag him off the training pitch at the end. Like, I just can't help but what it would look like if he took that work rate, took his everything, and just went to the Premier League and applied himself and stepped up to that level. Because look, the one thing with Celtic that will always, hold them back, is this the league around them isn't as good as it should be. Like Celtic and Rangers and, this year Aberdeen, there have been some fantastic stories, right? But then you look at some of the bottom half teams in the league and the level can be iffy at best at times, whereas you go, of course, to a Prem or another top 5 league, maybe it isn't the Premier League, and it's a little more consistent across the bottom. So I think for those reasons, I'd like to see Johnston make that jump and test himself.
I agree. I think the other two examples, I think it's a lot closer. I could see reasons why Davies and David would want to stay at Bayern or maybe stay at PSG, for example. And the other options are great as well. For Johnston, with no disrespect to the Scottish League, Alex, but you got that point across that the rest of the league just week in, week out, I'd like to see Alistair Johnston playing against top tier opponents. And I kind of look at a top 5 league, maybe the Bundesliga could be another example of a league I think that he could thrive in, but I just think that the Prem as well, that one of those mid-table teams, I think it would take his game to another level, and I think that he can do it. And that's kind of, I don't really want to see him stay and not be able to take his game to the next level and not be able to get that week in, week out training against top tier opposition. I love Alistair's game. I think the steps he's made over the past 5 years is incredible, and to see him land in the Premier League and potentially be a starter there would be icing on the cake. So this one's not as close for me. I would like to see him go, and I think he can. I don't necessarily think he will, though, at least like this upcoming year. Maybe he'll get a new contract that has a nice little release clause. Maybe a couple teams. What do you think? Do you think there's a chance he could leave this summer?
Well, I think what plays in his favor is I think the next 2 years are beneficial for him because say it's next year, who knows, maybe it's a new contract, maybe the price is up, he has a great season, boom, that allows him to move a year before the World Cup, gives him time to establish himself, or he waits, not a bad option, one more year at Celtic in 25, 26, he has a great World Cup, and then he moves after that. I think both of those scenarios could work out in his favor because it definitely feels like World Cup at home, Canada's going to get a bump. We've already started to see with the Bombitos, with the Cornelius, the Bears, everyone who made the league jump this year, essentially. But I think Johnston is definitely going to be one that's going to benefit from the next year and a half of Canadian football.
Not that I am in any position to give Alistair Johnston advice, but you made a really good point, Alex. I mean, if I'm Alistair Johnston and I'm in a great place right now, I have no problem staying at Celtic for another season, continuing to play week in, week out. Like you will compete within the league and you'll win, which is great. You also will get Champions League. But on top of that, it's not only the World Cup, it's a home World Cup. Canada should have a decent group. Maybe he can do something special. He can show the world what he does. We've talked about it many times of players who not just from Canada, but all over the world who get moves after the World Cup. So I think if you can cruise yourself out, go into the World Cup in match fitness, which you would do at Celtic because you get a ton of minutes, then play a good World Cup, you have a really good opportunity to have some big clubs maybe coming in for you. So not that is advice, but I would like to think that hopefully AJ will have a few options after that World Cup. But Alex, to wrap up the episode today, we will have a little bit of a rapid fire stay or go, but it's basically stay within Major League Soccer or go to Europe. So I'll fire a couple of them at you. We will start with Jacob Schaffelburg. He's the obvious one. It's great to see a little end product score 2 goals against Suriname. We saw him have end product at Copa America. A lot of fans who maybe weren't very familiar with Schaffelburg's game were wondering why he wasn't playing in Europe already. But once Copa America ended, he went back to Nashville, and those numbers didn't really happen. He was kind of quiet at Nashville. And so it's great to see him scoring again against Suriname. And you wonder, is it time? Because there's been some debates. Well, he's not doing it for Nashville week in, week out. Why should a European team come for him? But I think he's ready. I think he's ready to make the jump. I don't know exactly where he could land in Europe, but I'd like to see him maybe take that next step because I think there's a player in there and maybe, I don't know, just being a little bit more competitive atmosphere could bring it out of him. Because I think that right now there's definitely a big difference from the Jacob Schaffelburg we watch at Nashville versus the one that we see with Canada.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'll be honest with you. When looking at all of the 5, we have 5, just a spoiler alert, I guess, players we're about to talk about. For me, it's go, all of them.
All of them.
But what I will say is I'll amend it, make it more fun. I'll look more short-term, like the next 6 to 12 months. And I think for Schaffelburg, if you look at it from that perspective, I'd say stay. And I think the next 6 to 12 months could be huge because look, what have we learned from him with Canada? When you give him responsibility, you give him Jesse Marsh has given him a lot of responsibility, almost more than he gets with Nashville, on a pitch where there's Davids and Larens and Davieses and all this, Schaffelburg is just as important as all of them to Marsh. He's stepped up to that responsibility and he's liked playing in big games, right? His goals have been he scored the opener against the U.S. in a big friendly. He scored 2 big goals in this Suriname game to put away the tie. He scored last year at the Gold Cup, big goal. He scored Trinidad and Tobago this year to see that a lot of his goals are big goals. Venezuela in the Copa America quarterfinal. With Nashville, I mean, this year was a rough year. Maybe he didn't get to play in as many of those big games. When he did, he scored against Miami in Champions Cup. Can't forget. I would like to see him take that big game mentality, translate it into every game, and show he can really be dominant over a 10, 15 game stretch. And I think he does that. There might be a move opening up for him as soon as this summer or next year. And I don't think that's a bad option either. So I would implore him to stay and dominate because I think while he's I think there'd be a lot of reasons why he'd do well in Europe with his profile, is everything. I think you want to see him dominate a bit in MLS and really earn a move like that.
Plus, the same example we used for Alistair Johnston, if he starts for Canada at a World Cup, he'll still be like with 26 maybe at the time, 27, something like that. There's a good opportunity he can earn a 5-year deal over in Europe if he's able to get that attention on him. We'll move over to another player that I think would probably fall into the same boat. And just to be clear, I'd be down for Schaffelburg to leave whenever, but just because the World Cup's around the corner, and as long as you can go in fully fit, match fitness, you're playing, I don't think it's a bad option. What about a Dane St. Clair? Alex, you and I discussed in our last live stream that I was very confident that Maxime Crepeau was going to be the starter. I just didn't think in a knockout ties like this against Suriname that he was going to switch it up. You seemed very confident that it was going to be Dane, and you were absolutely spot on. He got the 2 starts. He looked well. He looked comfortable. 2 clean sheets as well. Can't really argue with that. He's at that age profile, and he's playing really well with Minnesota, but he's at that age profile where if he's going to make a move, I would have to imagine that it would come like the latest maybe after the World Cup. Same reason, if he shines, he gets attention. So what do you like about Dane? You said you wanted all these players to go. So would you like to see him go now? Which I think for a keeper, it's kind of hard to leave in January and maybe find a starting spot unless there's an injury to a team. Otherwise, do you think maybe after that 2026 World Cup, that's another good opportunity for him? And I believe he'd be 28, 29, which is kind of getting up there, but keepers do play longer.
Yeah, Dane St. Clair has full control because his contract is about to be up, but they have a 1-year option. I mean, I think Minnesota triggers that, no brainer. But then that's his last year of contract. And I think, for example, it could make a lot of sense for both parties if he leaves in June, July, right? Like, or when he has 6 months left, maybe Minnesota is able to get something for him. Maybe they're able to plan for a contingency, and then St. Clair goes to Europe. So I do wonder if not, he waits till the end of the year and he's a free agent, then he gets his choice. Because I think there's a lot of reasons why St. Clair could go to Europe. I think a big one is his size, his profile. He's shown that he can sweep for Canada, play deeper on his line. He's got the size that goalie coaches love. Yes, he's a bit older, but he's still young, right? Like you mentioned, for a keeper, 27. So I think St. Clair really feels like he's in control here. And I think that's something where him and Minnesota, you have to feel they'll work something out. Pushing St. Clair to that next level would be very big for him.
Yeah, and the fans love him, and there's definitely respect there between the club and the player, so we'll have to see. I agree. I'd like to see him in Europe. It'd be great to have a Canadian keeper over there doing the business, so we'll have to wait and see. 3 other players on this list. One, I think, falls into the category of a Dane St. Clair and Jacob Schaffelburg, and that is Ali Ahmed, a player that is keeping Tajon Buchanan on the bench right now. I know Tajon's returning from injury, but there's a debate just of how well Ali Ahmed is playing. So same question, Alex, and honestly, I think Johnston, Schaffelburg, Dane St. Clair, Ali Ahmed can all fall into this category because they're all guys who can make an impact for Canada. They're going to have an opportunity to shine at a World Cup. They're playing well they're getting respectable minutes for their clubs in Major League Soccer. So Ali Ahmed, do you think he should stay with Vancouver? When do you think they'd want to let him go? And on top of it, Vancouver have him on such a team-friendly deal that I think they'll play a little harder ball maybe, Alex, to want to let him go. But yeah, and he's young, and you kind of talked about Jacob Schaffelburg getting to that point where he's dominating Major League Soccer. So I like that point. For me, I would probably look at Ahmed leaving after the 2026 World Cup if he can, make an impact and impress some suitors across the pond.
Yeah, I think for him, it's just stay for now, go and dominate MLS, find your position. I think the Whitecaps realized towards the end of the year how to best use him. It's maybe more of an 8, right? And they tried him out wide. I think Canada, yes, he plays as a winger for Canada, but he's like, I love the term Marsh used, an 8.5, where, he's out wide and he's tucking in. He kind of does a bit of both. I'd like the Whitecaps to just like copy paste, Control C, don't even just do what he's doing there and get him to do that, get him to dominate. And yeah, then from there, that move will come. It was interesting that Josh Cloak reported that Bundesliga teams, Serie A teams are interested. And why not? Like, Ahmed's such a unique profile. He's a lanky guy. He moves. He's got very good physical attributes. He's got a good touch. He can progress the ball. It's just about putting that all together and getting some consistency. And I think if you can do that for 6 to 12 to 18 months for the Whitecaps, European teams already have been looking, and I'm sure one of them will pull a trigger.
And finally, I'll put these two together. We have Nathan Saliba and Jason Russell-Rowe. I know that these players are younger, and these are players that aren't actually starting and getting a ton of starting minutes for Canada. I'd maybe lean towards them going, kind of follow the Kone route. The younger players, if when January comes, if they can get a suitor, I think you can see what it can do to a player when you get that opportunity to go over young like Kone did. And just, I mean, maybe you're playing a ton like Kone, maybe you're not at times, but you're definitely going to learn and create opportunities for yourself. So for those two players, I'd like to see them get the chance to go to Europe and maybe like a Belgium, Netherlands type league, maybe the championship. That's what I'm leaning. But if they stay in Major League Soccer, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, I mean, look, for Russell Rowe, his deal is up this year. Then they have 2 years of option, but there have been links from Scotland already. There's teams looking. Columbus have shown they're willing to sell guys on. They sold Aiden Morris this summer to Middlesbrough, right? So like, if the opportunity is there for Jason Russell Rowe, I'd say take it. He's young enough where, you know, there will be more suitors naturally because of his age. He's scored a high amount in low minutes. Some smart team might out there, but hey, maybe if we give him more minutes, because, you know, unfortunately he has to go up against Cucho and Rossi, which can be tough sometimes. So I think Russell Rowe would definitely be in that category for those reasons. So Liba, I think it's one where I think he'll stay 6 to 12 months, but I think with his play over the last 2 months, if he plays like that for the first half or the full season, it's going to be very similar to how like Kone broke out, had a great year, was gone by the end of the year. With Saliba's age, if he keeps up these last 2 months, I have full confidence that his profile will attract suitors. So Saliba definitely feels like he'll be a centerpiece for Montreal, and hopefully he can build off it because he was very fun to watch.
Absolutely. Well said, Alex. And that is all the time we have on today's episode. Let us know down in the comments section if you agree with our opinions and if you think these players should stay or go. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the episode. And if you did, as always, be sure to drop a like, drop a sub. We'll see you guys soon. Cheers, friends.